They ignored me for 8 long years. Now they're standing at the gates of my mansion, pretending nothing happened. Those were the words running through my mind the moment I saw them again. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Madison Cole, and for as long as I can remember, I felt like a shadow in my own home. My parents, Henry and Darlene, never treated me the same way they treated my older brother, Blake. To them, he was the golden child who could do no wrong. Everything he wanted, he got. Everything he messed up, they fixed. And everything I did, no matter how much effort I put into it, was ignored or brushed aside like it didn't matter. Growing up, I learned to stay quiet because speaking up never changed anything. When I brought home good grades, they barely looked at them. When I shared my dream of becoming an architect, they laughed and said I needed to be more realistic. Meanwhile, Blake's smallest achievements were celebrated like he cured a disease. I tried to understand it. I tried to believe maybe one day they would see me. But deep down, I always knew I was the extra piece in their perfect picture. Things got worse as I got older. Arguments became normal, especially when I mentioned college. I worked hard, I saved, and I had a plan. But to them, my dreams were nothing more than childish ideas. Blake wanted money to invest in something clueless and risky, and they handed it to him without a second thought. I wanted help applying to schools, and they told me I was being selfish for wanting more than I deserved. The breaking point came when I turned 18. We had another argument, one that started small but quickly turned into them listing everything they thought was wrong with me. They said I was ungrateful, dramatic, and disrespectful. Then they said the final words that pushed me out completely. If you think you're so grown, then you're on your own. Don't expect anything from us. And so I left. No bag full of memories, no warm goodbye. Just a small duffel with a few clothes and the last bit of hope I had. I walked out because staying felt like slowly drowning. They didn't stop me. They didn't call after me. They didn't ask where I was going. It was as if losing me meant nothing to them. Spent the next years building a life on my own, piece by piece, with no one cheering for me and no one waiting for me to come home. I learned how to survive by depending only on myself. And while those years were painful, they also shaped me into someone stronger than they ever believed I could be. Now, 8 years later, they were suddenly standing outside my mansion, acting like the past never happened. And as I watched them through my gate camera, all I could think was, why now? What made them come back after all this time? Growing up in Ohio never felt warm or comforting for me. My childhood was filled with moments that should have mattered, but were treated like nothing. I remember sitting at the kitchen table on my birthdays, waiting for someone to say something more than a quick, "Yeah, happy birthday." There were no celebrations, no cakes, no effort. Meanwhile, Blake's birthdays looked like holidays. The house would be filled with decorations, music, and expensive gifts. I used to wonder what was wrong with me, why I wasn't worth the same joy they gave him so easily. Broken promises became a normal part of my life. If they said they would come to my school events, I already knew they wouldn't show up. If I asked for help with a project, they told me Blake needed them more. They claimed they were too busy or too tired, but somehow they always had time when it came to anything involving him. I learned quickly not to expect anything because disappointment was all I ever received. Money was something they used like a weapon without realizing it. Blake wanted a new bike, he got it the next day. He wanted a trip with his friends, they'd pay for everything. I once asked for a small drawing set so I could practice designing, and they told me it was a waste of money. They said art and architecture were just hobbies, not real careers. They didn't want to encourage unrealistic dreams. Those words stayed with me longer than they ever knew. I spent most of my childhood sitting quietly in my room, sketching on old notebooks because that was all I had. No one cared enough to look at what I drew. No one praised me, even when teachers said I had talent. Whenever I tried to share something I made, my parents brushed past me or told me they were too busy dealing with Blake's needs. It felt like I was living in the same house but not part of the same family. The painful part was how normal it became. I stopped asking for attention because I didn't want to feel rejected again. I stopped showing them my dreams because hearing, "You'll never be successful," hurt more each time. I started to understand the truth. Love in that house wasn't something given freely. It depended on how much you matched their expectations, and I never did. Even when I tried my best, it was never enough to earn even a moment of the warmth they so easily gave Blake. I wasn't the child they wanted. I was just the one they tolerated. Those years shaped the way I saw myself. I was young, but I learned early that if I wanted anything in life, I'd have to get it on my own. No one was going to lift me up. No one was going to guide me. I had to build myself without the kind of support most children grow up believing they deserve. Looking back, I realized that the emptiness I felt wasn't because I wanted a perfect family. I just wanted to matter. And in that house, I never did. Turning 18 should have felt like the start of something hopeful. But for me, it was the moment everything broke for good. My parents made their final choice, and it was clear as day who they cared about and who they didn't. Blake had once again gotten himself into trouble and needed money for another one of his plans. And without even thinking twice, Henry and Darlene decided to give him everything they had left. When I asked where that left me and what I was supposed to do about my own future, they looked at me like I was the problem. They told me I needed to stop being a burden and stop expecting anything from them. Hearing those words from your own parents feels like someone pulling the ground out from under your feet. I remember standing there, struggling to breathe, while they made it sound like I had asked for the world when all I ever wanted was a small chance to build a life. But they didn't care. Their minds were made up, and there was no space in their plans for me. So I left. I packed the few clothes I owned into a worn-out duffel bag, grabbed the $60 I had saved from part-time work, and walked out the front door. No one tried to stop me. No one asked where I was going or if I needed help. They didn't even look up from what they were doing. It was like I had never been a part of their life at all. I waited for a call or a message, just something even out of basic human concern. But nothing came that day. Nothing came the next day. Nothing came for years. I found a small basement apartment that I shared with two strangers who were just trying to survive like I was. The place was dark, the walls were cracked, and the air smelled damp, but it was the only thing I could afford. I slept on a thin mattress that hurt my back, but at least it was mine. At least it was a place where I wasn't constantly reminded that I didn't matter. I worked whatever jobs I could find, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves in the early morning, helping at a small diner in between. The hours were long, and the pay barely covered the rent, but I pushed myself because I had no choice. Every dollar meant I could eat. Every shift meant I could stay off the streets for one more month. I learned quickly how to stretch money, how to keep going even when I was exhausted, and how to rely only on myself. There were nights I cried quietly so the others wouldn't hear. Nights when I felt angry, confused, or completely empty. I couldn't understand how parents could let their child walk away with nothing. I kept wondering if they ever felt guilty or if I ever crossed their minds. But deep down, I already knew the answer. I had walked out of their house with almost nothing, but that moment also lit something inside me. If I was going to build a life, it would be on my own terms. Their rejection hurt, but it also pushed me toward a future they never believed I could have. I didn't know where my path would lead. I just knew I wouldn't let their choices decide the rest of my life. Life during those early years was hard, but I kept pushing myself because I knew no one else would ever do it for me. I worked 3 different jobs just to stay afloat. My days started before the sun came up and ended long after everyone else was asleep. I stocked shelves at a small grocery store in the mornings, cleaned offices during the day, and worked in a diner at night. By the time I got home, my feet hurt, my eyes burned, and my body felt like it wanted to collapse. But I still refused to give up. Even with all that work, I made time for night classes at the community college. I didn't have money for expensive programs, so I took whatever courses I could afford. I sat in those classrooms half asleep sometimes, but whenever I opened a sketchbook or worked on a design project, I felt awake again. Architecture made me feel alive in a way nothing else ever had. It gave me something to look forward to, something that felt like mine. One night, while I was working on a small assignment in the college library, someone walked up and asked to see my sketches. I looked up and saw an older man with silver hair and kind eyes. His name was Gerald Lawson. He introduced himself as a retired architect who had taught a few workshops at the college. I expected him to point out flaws or tell me I needed more training, but instead, he told me he saw real talent in my work. Raw, instinctive talent. That moment changed everything. Gerald didn't just compliment me, he took time to guide me. He met with me after classes, showed me how to refine my drawings, taught me how to think like an architect, and helped me understand what real design meant. For the first time in my life, someone believed in me without wanting anything in return. Someone saw value in me that my own parents never bothered to notice. He encouraged me to apply for scholarships, even when I doubted myself. He helped me with the paperwork, reviewed my portfolio, and pushed me to take a chance. When the acceptance letter arrived saying I had earned a full scholarship to a respected university program, I cried for the first time in a long time. Not out of sadness, but because someone's faith in me had finally paid off. From there, things slowly began to change. I went from being the girl who worked endless jobs to being a design intern at a small firm. I spent hours learning everything I could, drafting, planning, building models, and understanding real construction work. My first project wasn't big, just a small home renovation, but the moment I saw something I designed come to life, I knew I was exactly where I belonged. Over time, one project turned into another. My portfolio grew, clients started recommending me, and soon I had enough experience and confidence to start my own firm. It wasn't easy. I faced long days, tough clients, financial risks, and moments of doubt. But I kept going because every part of the journey felt like I was finally stepping into the future I had once only dreamed about. I had built myself from nothing, no support, no family, no safety net. Just determination, hard work, and the guidance of someone who believed I was worth the effort. And for the first time in my life, I felt proud of the person I was becoming. Years passed, and slowly, step by step, my life began to look nothing like the one I had come from. Hard work turned into opportunities, and opportunities turned into a career that I had once only imagined in quiet moments. I became one of the youngest luxury residential designers in California, something no one back home would ever have believed. Clients trusted my vision, my name began to carry weight in the industry, and my projects grew bigger with each year. People who had never met me spoke about my designs like they were works of art, and every time I heard that, it felt unreal. When I finally had enough saved, I bought a mansion overlooking the coastline. The first time I walked through it, the sun setting across the water and light pouring through the tall windows, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just pride, it was proof that I had made it, even after being pushed out with almost nothing. I had built a life completely on my own. No one handed me anything. No one opened doors for me. I had forced my own way in, even when the world felt too heavy at times. My home became my safe place. Each room reflected pieces of my journey: quiet colors, open spaces, warm light. I filled the house with things that made me feel calm: soft blankets, simple furniture, quiet corners where I could think. Every detail reminded me of how far I had come from the basement apartment where I once worried about every dollar. Sometimes I would stand on the balcony at night, watching the waves, and I would think about the girl I used to be, the one who cried quietly in the dark because no one wanted her. I wished I could reach back in time and tell her that she would make it. But success didn't wipe away everything I went through. No matter how beautiful my home was, a part of me still carried the old wounds. Growing up, unwanted leaves marks you can't always see. I struggled with trusting people, with believing I deserved good things, with feeling like I belonged anywhere. Even when I achieved more than I ever dreamed, some nights felt heavy, and the silence reminded me of the loneliness I had carried for so long. Not once during those 8 years did I hear from Henry, Darlene, or Blake. No birthday messages. No apologies. No calls asking how I was doing. It was as if I had disappeared entirely from their world. At first, that silence hurt more than anything. Then, little by little, I learned to live without expecting anything from them. Their absence became normal, and I built a life where their voices no longer had any power. Still, the fact that they never reached out showed me the truth I had always known. They never cared enough to check whether I survived on my own. And while I had grown stronger without them, the memory of that neglect always stayed somewhere inside me. But even with all those scars, I stood in a mansion they never believed I could earn, living a life they once claimed I wasn't capable of. I had succeeded far beyond their expectations, without a single bit of help from the people who were supposed to love me the most. One quiet afternoon, I was sitting in my home office reviewing design plans when my security team called. They rarely contacted me directly unless something unusual was happening. The guard sounded unsure as he explained that 2 strangers were standing at the front gate asking to see me. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I felt a small wave of confusion. I walked over to the monitor, thinking maybe it was a delivery or someone lost. But the second the camera feed loaded, my whole body froze. There they were, Henry and Darlene. I hadn't seen their faces in 8 years, but the memories came back instantly, sharp and heavy. They looked different than I remembered. Older, their hair grayer, their shoulders not as straight. But the look in their eyes was the same one I grew up with, an expression that made it seem like the world owed them something. Even through the screen, I could feel the old tension rising inside me. It felt like being pulled back into a past I had worked so hard to escape. They stood close to the gate, talking to each other as if they were casually visiting a friend. When the guard asked them why they were there, they told him they were just stopping by to check on me. Hearing that made something twist inside my chest. Check on me? After 8 years of silence? After leaving me to survive on my own without a single call, message, or concern? They acted like walking up to my mansion was the most normal thing in the world. As if they hadn't watched me walk out of their lives with a bag and $60. As if they hadn't ignored every chance to reach out. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what they were doing here now. Part of me wondered if they expected me to be grateful or surprised, maybe even happy to see them. But all I felt was confusion mixed with a dull ache I thought I had buried long ago. Seeing them up close again made memories I didn't want returned too easily. Years of being overlooked, ignored, pushed aside. It made me feel like the same girl who used to stand in doorways waiting for them to notice her. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had built a life so far from the one they gave me that it almost felt like two different worlds. Yet their presence brought all of it crashing together. They looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from age. More like the tiredness of people who had run out of options. Their clothes were worn, and the way they kept glancing at the mansion told me they were trying to hide their surprise. Still, beneath that, their expressions held that same sense of entitlement I had known all my life. As if showing up at my home meant I should automatically open the gate and welcome them. I stood there quietly, watching them through the monitor, trying to understand why they were here after so long. A knot formed in my stomach because deep down, I knew they didn't come out of love. People who care don't stay silent for nearly a decade. People who care don't only show up when it's convenient. Whatever their reason was, it wasn't going to be simple. And it definitely wasn't going to be innocent. I didn't want to let them in, but I also didn't want a scene at the gate. So I told the guard to open it, and a few minutes later Henry and Darlene were standing in my entryway, looking around like tourists stepping into another world. Their eyes moved over the high ceilings, the art on the walls, the clean open space. They tried to hide their surprise, but it was written all over their faces. It felt strange having them there, like mixing two parts of my life that were never meant to meet. We sat in the living room. I kept my distance, sitting on the opposite side of the room. They acted casual at first, asking how I'd been, how long I'd lived here, and whether I still drew those little house ideas. Hearing that made something tighten inside me. They were trying to act like proud parents catching up with their successful daughter, but their voices didn't match their words. They sounded nervous, like they were working up to something. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. Darlene finally sighed and said they were going through a tough time. Henry jumped in and explained that Blake had made some bad choices. He called them investments that didn't work out, but from the way they avoided looking directly at me, I knew it was much worse than that. Little by little, the story unraveled. Blake had lost a huge amount of money, then borrowed more, and then lost even that. Their savings were gone. Their house was in danger. They had nothing left. And suddenly, everything made sense. They hadn't come to check on me. They hadn't missed me. They hadn't realized they'd made a mistake. They had come because they needed something. Because their favorite child had failed them in a way they couldn't fix. Because the daughter they once pushed aside had something they now wanted. Darlene looked straight at me and said they hoped I would step up as their child and help them through this. She said it like she was offering me some kind of honor. Henry nodded and added that family takes care of each other. The words were almost unbelievable. Family takes care of each other? That didn't apply when I was 18 and begging for support. It didn't apply when I walked out with nothing. It didn't apply during the 8 years they didn't bother to ask if I was alive. They were sitting in my home acting like the past had no weight. Like abandonment could just be erased because they were now the ones who needed help. They wanted me to fix the damage Blake had caused, to save them from the fallout of choices that had nothing to do with me. Hearing them talk like that brought back every memory of being overlooked, every moment of being pushed aside. They hadn't changed. Not in the slightest. They were the same people who believed I wasn't worth their time until I became useful. I stayed quiet for a long moment, letting their words hang in the air. They waited, expecting me to say yes without hesitation, as if opening my wallet would somehow prove I was a good daughter. As if all those years of silence didn't matter. As if I owed them something simply, because we shared blood. But all I felt was the sting of how easy it was for them to forget the pain they caused. They didn't come for me. They came for what I had. And that hurt more than seeing them at the gate. Madison sits in front of them, trying to stay calm. But the way they twist every word makes something inside her break. She has spent her whole childhood staying quiet, trying not to cause problems. But now she can't hold it anymore. She tells them everything she has carried for years. How they ignored her birthdays, how they made her feel like she was only useful when they needed something, how they treated Blake like the perfect child while she stood in the background hoping for just a little love. She speaks slowly, not yelling, but with a tired honesty that hits deeper than anger. Henry tries to interrupt, acting confused as if he has no idea what she is talking about. Darlene frowns and waves her hand, calling her too emotional, and saying she always exaggerated things. They both pretend to be shocked, as if her pain is surprising, as if they hadn't created it. Madison watches their expressions and finally understands that they were never going to admit anything. They weren't here for the truth. They weren't here because they cared. They didn't even come to fix the past. All they wanted was help, and now they wanted to make her feel guilty for everything they chose to do. She keeps talking, telling them how she used to wait near the window hoping they would come home early just to spend time with her. How she tried to earn their attention with good grades and quiet behavior. How she blamed herself for their coldness. She tells them how she cried alone when they didn't show up to school events. How she learned to celebrate achievements by herself because no one else ever did. She doesn't raise her voice, but her words are sharp because they come from years of silence. Instead of listening, they shake their heads and insist she is making things bigger than they were. They say she should let go of the past and act like family, as if the past wasn't the very reason they were all sitting here. They call her ungrateful for not wanting to support them in a hard time, ignoring the fact that they never supported her through anything. Their denial feels like another abandonment, just happening right in front of her eyes. Madison sits back and looks at them with a strange mix of sadness and clarity. For the first time, she sees them exactly as they are. People who only show up when they want something. People who refuse to take responsibility. People who can't even acknowledge the pain they caused. She realizes she has been holding on to a hope that they would someday recognize her value. But now she sees that hope was never real. Her voice shakes, but she speaks clearly. She tells them she can't pretend anymore. She can't keep acting like their behavior didn't shape her whole life. She can't let them rewrite history just to feel better. She isn't their rescue plan. She isn't the forgotten child they can suddenly claim when it benefits them. And she won't let them use her the way they used her silence before. By the time she finishes, the room feels heavy. Henry and Darlene look defensive, not remorseful. But Madison doesn't feel weak anymore. She feels like a person finally standing up in a space where she once felt invisible. She realizes that this moment, painful as it is the first step toward finally freeing herself from everything they once made her believe about her worth. Madison takes a slow breath, letting the weight of everything settle inside her. She doesn't feel shaken anymore. Instead, she feels steady, clear, and strangely calm. The years of confusion and hurt no longer control her. She finally understands that she doesn't owe these people anything, not an explanation, not comfort, not a place in her life. They had their chance when she was young and needed them, and they walked away without hesitation. Now they want something again, but she is no longer the quiet girl waiting for them to choose her. She rises from her seat, not in anger, but with a quiet confidence that surprises even her. Henry and Darlene stop talking the moment they see her stand. For the first time, they don't look in charge. They look uncertain, almost nervous, as if they can sense the shift in the room. Madison looks at them, not with hate, but with a firm understanding of who they truly are. She tells them in a calm voice that she doesn't have anything left to give them. She explains that she has built her life on her own, piece by piece, without their support, and she isn't going to let them drag her into their problems now. She reminds them they were the ones who stepped away first. They were the ones who closed the door. And she is simply choosing not to reopen it. They start to protest, trying to soften their tone, trying to make her feel guilty, but she doesn't let their words sink in this time. She listens without reacting, and then she tells them that Blake can deal with the mess he created. She says it plainly, without cruelty, just stating a truth they need to hear. Blake made choices, and now he has to face the consequences of those choices. She isn't responsible for fixing anything he damaged. Henry shifts uncomfortably, and Darlene's expression tightens. but neither of them finds the right words to fight back. Their usual tactics don't work anymore because Madison isn't scared of disappointing them. She isn't scared of losing them. She already lived that loss years ago, and she survived. She walks toward the door and opens it, letting the cool air drift inside. She doesn't speak loudly or rush them. She simply gestures toward the exit, making it clear the conversation is over. There's a quiet authority in the way she stands, something they have never seen in her before. They look at her as if they barely recognize her, and maybe they truly don't. They only knew the version of her that stayed silent. They step out slowly, realizing they can't push her the way they used to. They can't twist her emotions or make her feel guilty. Their old control is gone, slipping through their hands like dust. Madison watches them walk away without feeling the old ache in her chest. Instead, she feels a lightness spreading through her, like she just set something heavy down after holding it for too long. She closes the door gently, not slamming it, because this isn't anger. It's freedom. And as she stands in the quiet space of her own home, she understands that the truth she finally spoke wasn't about hurting them. It was about freeing herself. And for the first time in her life, that feels like enough. After they left, Madison sat quietly in her living room, letting the silence fill the space. The tension that had built over years of waiting, hoping, and hurting was finally gone. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the weight of anger or resentment pressing on her chest. She realized that success had never really been her revenge. Owning a mansion, designing luxurious homes, or proving herself to the world didn't heal the emptiness she carried. What brought real relief was peace, the freedom from carrying their judgment, their neglect, and their selfish expectations. That was the victory she had waited for without even knowing it. She thought about Gerald, her mentor, who had guided her from the very beginning. Without him, she might have given up long before reaching this point. He had believed in her talent when no one else did, had spent hours helping her refine her skills, and had treated her with the kindness and respect she had been denied in her own family. Over the years, their relationship had grown beyond mentor and student. Gerald had become the father figure she never had, someone she could trust, rely on, and lean on without fear of judgment. The love and support she found in him, and in a few trusted friends, made her life feel full in a way her parents never had the chance to. Madison reflected on how far she had come, from a girl ignored and dismissed to a woman who had built a life she could be proud of. Every struggle, every long night, and every moment of loneliness had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She could finally see her worth without needing anyone else's approval. The people who truly mattered were the ones who stayed, who encouraged her, and who treated her with respect. They were the family she had chosen for herself, the people who lifted her up rather than weighed her down. She also thought about her parents and Blake. Their actions had shown her who they really were, and that truth no longer hurt her. She didn't need them to apologize or make amends. She didn't need their recognition or approval. She had learned that sometimes the people related to you by blood aren't the ones who deserve a place in your heart. And by letting them go, she had created space for genuine love and support in her life. Standing by the large windows, looking out at the ocean, Madison felt a calm settle over her. The waves moved steadily, like time itself moving forward, reminding her that life was bigger than the pain of the past. She whispered to herself a thought that had taken years to accept. Sometimes blood isn't thicker than water. Sometimes it's the weight you finally let go of that sets you free. And in that moment, she knew she had truly let go. She had closed the chapter on the family who abandoned her and opened a new one filled with love, respect, and peace. The kind of life she had always deserved.